We'll make a start, guys. Welcome everyone to the fifth Horizon 3 Biotech Investing webinar for 2021, hosted by Horizon 3 Biotech Fund and sponsored and conducted by FB Rice and Monsoon Communications. This webinar is being recorded, and before we begin, the disclaimer: the purpose of this presentation is not to give financial product advice. If any product advice is given in the presentation, the standard disclaimers that it is general advice only applies. That is, it has been prepared without considering any person's objectives, financial situation or needs, and therefore you should consider the appropriateness of the advice in light of your own situation and requirements. So today we are fortunate to have two experienced biotech sector executives, Dirk van Dissel, founder of Canda Advisory, and Dr. Chris Baldwin, Deputy CEO and Chief Commercialisation Officer at Exopharm. Bit of a bio into the guys. Dirk has experience in providing equity capital market solutions and corporate advisory services to companies in the life science and other sectors. Previously, Dirk worked in the private equity and boutique investment banking sectors prior to managing the equity capital markets desk and corporate division at an Australian stockbroking firm for 11 years. For 15 years, Dirk has assisted in the raising of hundreds of thousands of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars, I beg your pardon, Dirk, for ASX-listed and unlisted companies, and has advised on the buy and sell side of numerous transactions. Dirk's experience ranges from securing strategic investors for startup, biotech and technology companies through to working on notable M&A transactions. Chris received his PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Cambridge. While matriculated at Trinity College, Chris joined Exopharm in November 2019, bringing global commercial experience to the company. Most recently, Chris was responsible for Haemonetics, largest and most profitable business unit across Asia Pacific, with P&L responsibilities with from Taiwan to Pakistan. Previously responsible for all sales and marketing in Southeast Asia, Chris provided strategy leadership across Asia Pacific, including China. Chris was at McKinsey's and Company, where he served banking, pharmaceutical and NGO clients. Previously, Chris was at New York Blood Center, where he was executive director for 8 years and responsible for the blood supply across the greater New York metropolitan area. So today we'll be discussing, amongst other things, the increasing role of diagnostics in a COVID-19 world and the relevant approved Alzheimer's drug, Aduhelm. You can help me out with that pronunciation. I've heard Aduhelm and Aduhelm and Exopharm. So to the audience, please use the Q&A button at the bottom on your Zoom screen anytime, and we'll address as many of these as possible after we answer the pre-submitted questions. First, map on the horizon, where I comment on some of the important developments impacting our sector and thus investment objectives. So with the goal of making data a facet of every healthcare decision and spinning that information back into life science research, Datavant and the medical records platform developer Ciox Health, plus their VC backers, have agreed to lay out $7 billion to combine their enterprises. The resulting company plans to offer a joint technology ecosystem that brings disparate health records together and allow for secure, anonymous exchanges among patients, providers, and biopharma companies alike. It's the largest transaction by far among recent deals in the space, which focuses in part on de-identifying data so researchers can easily and legally use it. At home, but in the USA, Cyclopharm, the US FDA has provided a complete response letter for the new drug application for Technegas and determined it is unable to approve the NDA for Technegas in its present form, and has provided a definitive list of items and recommendations for outstanding elements to be addressed within a 12-month period. Cyclopharm expects to resolve all these elements with a view to securing approval for commercial sales of Technegas in the US market in 2022. I've actually read somewhere where the company feels that this may only delay things by a couple of months, but I'm sure we'll get a question on that. Another company, Let's Get Checked, recently closed its high-flying Series D with support from a handful of long-time backers that included Illumina Ventures, United Health, Optum Ventures, and the golfer Rory McIlroy through his own Symphony Ventures. The round was led by Caston Capital. The funding, which values the company at US $1 billion, will help Let's Get Checked, which is based in both New York City and Dublin, expand its remote care services to meet the even faster expanding demand for at-home testing and virtual clinical visits, really in the sweet spot during the pandemic. That will include the addition of new diagnostic tests to the company's offerings, which already include more than 100 tests for cholesterol, diabetes, sexual health, and more, as well as new online chat and video visit capabilities to make it easier for us to access remote care consultations. That expansion, plus Let's Get Checked plans to expand its pharmaceutical services, beginning with the acquisition of a Florida-based pharmacy, will support the launch of a care pathways. Ultimately, Let's Get Checked aims to be a one-stop shop that will offer patients initial virtual consultations, at-home diagnostics, follow-up meetings, and necessary prescriptions, all but eliminating the need for in-person doctor visits. That's quite a development. A team of diabetes researchers at Massachusetts General Hospital have spent the last 2 decades building up data to support their idea of repurposing the old tuberculosis vaccine, Bacillus calmette-guerin, or as we know it, BCG, in type 1 diabetes. They've been testing it in adults and hope to launch a pediatric trial of the vaccine later this year. Now they have new evidence that starting the treatment early in life could quickly reset patients' immune system and restore blood sugar to normal levels. The ability of BCG to alter blood sugar centers around its effect on regulatory T cells, Tregs, in the immune system. Tregs prevent the destruction of insulin-producing pancreatic islets, and the MGH, the Massachusetts General Hospital team, previously showed that BCG alters gene expression in a way that restores the key immune cells. Now to our panelists. Dirk, can I start with you? You founded Candor Advisory and Candor Asset Management. For our life science audience, please tell us about some of your relevant life science advisory mandates.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you for the opportunity to be a panelist on today's Horizon 3 Biotech Investing webinar. And also a shout out to all those suffering under lockdown. We feel your pain. On the advisory side of things, in the healthcare space, we act for Proteomics International Laboratories Limited. Their ASX code is PIQ, and we've acted for them for a number of years. So quite topical that we're discussing diagnostics today. And I should say, full disclosure here, we're their corporate advisor to PIQ, and also we've been significant investors in them for a number of years. So they're just one of the clients there in the life sciences space. We also work with a number of junior unlisted diagnostic and biotech companies. We assist them in various capacities, most times raising capital and also assisting them on their pathway to IPO or trade sale. Then in addition to that, we've recently co-book runner for NIRADA, the code's NYR, and assisted there with the $11 million capital raise that they've just completed. And then on top of that, we've participated in a large number of placements and IPOs in the biotech or healthcare space.
So Dirk, on that topic, what life science investments have you made?
So looking at investments that we've made for our fund over the last few months, I can say that we've been active in trading the listed CAR T cell group of companies. Look, there are not many on the ASX, but certainly it's a sector creating a lot of noise. And the performance of other CAR T cell group or space companies such as Imugene, which is trading at a near $2 billion market cap, have sort of paved the way for others like Prescient Therapeutics, code PTX, to play catch up. And so we bet on that, and they obviously did catch up quite well over the last couple of weeks. We've also invested recently in Suda Pharmaceuticals, the code SUD, which has just acquired a CAR T cell combination platform technology. We've also taken advantage of the recent tax loss volatility in the market over the last couple of weeks, and we've made a number of other selected life science or biotech investments, namely Invex Therapeutics, the code IXC, Telix Pharmaceuticals on the recent pullback, the code's TLX, Nanosonics. This was about a month or two ago when it had a bit of a pullback. Really quite like that company, and also just putting the toe back in the water with Mac7 Tech, which is a medical imaging company, M7T, the code there, and also Rhythm Biosciences, which is developing a simple blood test to diagnose colorectal cancer. On top of that, and a bit more left field, we've made some investments over the last, you'd say, almost 6 to 9 months in North American listed psychedelic treatment companies, such as Compass, MindMed, and Loeb Sciences. So I think this space has got a lot more to run, particularly going after treating conditions like PTSD, for which there really hasn't been anything on the market or come to market for a very long time. And then on, I guess, the more recent and smaller end of the spectrum, I'm doing some DD on Agencia Pharmaceuticals. AGN is the code there. They're developing a neuroprotective drug aimed at stroke sufferers, and I've heard a lot of good stuff about this from my mates in WA.
Thanks, Dirk. So you talked about some diagnostics. What developments and implications are you seeing in the diagnostic space for COVID-19?
Look, Matt, it's fair to say that prior to COVID-19, the world, or should I say the general public, were probably not that interested in diagnostics and the important role diagnosing something early can play in our health system. Now, fast forward to now, and with half of Australia currently in lockdown, and Australia and the world are acutely aware of how important it is to get tested for COVID-19, even when you don't have symptoms. So by getting tested, we as a community can get ahead of the virus, take precautionary measures, and protect people. This increased understanding of the importance of testing, i.e. diagnosing something, will flow across into other areas of our lives. And separately, a lot of people around the world with other serious illnesses, ranging from diabetes to cancer, have not been seeing their doctors because of a fear of getting COVID-19. Essentially, they've been staying at home, avoiding places like doctors' waiting rooms, which is understandable. But not helping the situation is healthcare systems have been prioritising COVID-19 over other ailments. And so I wouldn't be alone in saying over the coming years, we'll face a tsunami of increased incidence of diseases and comorbidities due to this 1.5 years of people not keeping on top of their illnesses and focusing on COVID instead. So what does this mean? Well, it means we've got a lot of ground to make up in addressing and treating these serious illnesses, something made worse in an ageing population. But look, it's not all over, it's not all great concern there. On a positive note, there have been huge amounts of government and private investment in pathology labs around the world, and also in companies developing new and innovative tests in the diagnostic space. This, combined with a population that's more aware and more willing to get tested, no matter what the ailment, means we can hopefully start to get on top of this impending health issue. And so I guess this is a macro trend that is one of the main reasons I'm so bullish on the diagnostic space.
Well, thanks for that, Dirk. And full disclosure, I'm on the board of a couple of companies called Microbio and Grey Innovation. Both Microbio and Grayscan, a spin out of Grey Innovation, have recently developed COVID diagnostic tests that can distinguish between infectious or replicating SARS-CoV-2 and non-infectious SARS-CoV-2. From your perspective, what implications might diagnostic tests such as these have on our community going forward?
Matt, if only we had these tests in our hands at the moment. To be able to test someone and determine if they are infectious or not will play a huge role once we start to move to living with COVID. And that's a reality that everyone should really start thinking about. The microbio test, combined with a significant portion of the population being vaccinated, would potentially allow us to remain open and not be locked down when rising infection numbers are recorded, because we could implement measures to isolate those who are super spreaders, i.e. the highly infectious people or people with strains that are going to replicate quickly, versus those that could be just treated as having the flu or, you know, or a bad case of the cold and not being that infectious.
Yeah, no, that's a big change, but it's a fair way off both of them to sort of become mainstream.
Just on microbiome, Matt, I noticed they received federal government funding not too long ago via, I think it was a Commercialisation Australia grant. That's always a good sign, because that process is quite rigorous, and you know, we view that as one of the boxes of DD for a number of the companies that we look at. Can you talk about what program that relates to?
Yeah, it was not for the COVID diagnostic. It was for their Infect ID for sepsis. So the original technology of microbiome was for identifying the pathogen that it's causing sepsis within an hour or two, as opposed to, you know, up to 3 days it can take to identify the pathogen if you end up in an emergency ward. So so that commercialization grant was for the development of that, and that is coming along very nicely in parallel to the COVID diagnostic.
Excellent.
So, Chris, thanks very much for joining us as well. Please tell the audience about Exopharm, exosomes, and how they can target therapeutic agents.
Great. Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate the chance to be on the panel as well. So I think maybe the easiest place to start is to think about what exosomes are. And my job has gotten a lot easier because Pfizer has taught the world the power of what I'd call an artificial exosome. If you look at the vaccine that the Pfizer has, it's a lipid nanoparticle that's surrounding an mRNA that causes the body to create proteins that are coming from the virus so that the body can learn to fight that protein and destroy the virus. So what that has to do with exosomes is this. Exosomes are small fat molecules, not molecules, but droplets, nanoparticles, roughly about 100 nanometers across. They surround materials that cells need to pass between themselves. So that typically that's an RNA, often it's a protein, sometimes it's a building block. But effectively, cells figured out how to pass messages back and forth and cause other cells to do things that would help the body a long, long time ago. And so the way that works is by these exosomes that all cells create. And what we're doing at Exopharm is taking that natural process of creating exosomes and changing what's inside of an exosome or what's on the surface of an exosome so that we can deliver new drugs to new places. And why that's exciting for us is that it's because it's a natural entity, it can go places that the lipid nanoparticles or the Pfizer type approach to RNA delivery can never go.
Okay, great. And what are the development hurdles and timelines over the foreseeable future for Exopharm?
So there's really two main tracks that, well, I'd say actually three main tracks on this question, because one of them has to do with the industry's growth as a whole. A lot of our underlying technology is around the use of purification methods that will allow exosomes to be purified from the source materials, typically cell media, where cells are grown, produce exosomes, and the exosomes have to be purified and turned into a medical product. All of our licensees that are out there that are potentially taking that up are learning how to use exosomes themselves. And so one of the hurdles we have is just how quickly that happens. Internally, in terms of taking those techniques and using them for our own devices, the big hurdle really is partnership and collaboration, finding alliances with other pharma partners who have assets that aren't getting where they need to go and helping them understand the potential of exosomes to get them there.
So talking partnerships, are you in development discussions with any collaborators at this stage?
Yes, we have a number of conversations going on every day. Pretty much, it feels like I'm signing a confidentiality agreement. Every one of these discussions kind of enter what I would call the sales funnel, really around building alliances. So we know that if we're going to have a successful collaboration with a major international partner, it's going to take us plenty of time to understand what they need, explain what we can provide to them, and build that relationship that's going to last over a period of years as we develop a drug together. But that there are plenty of those discussions. Some of them are early stage, some of them are later stages, but they're all fascinating.
Okay, Chris, don't want you to say anything confidential here, but who would a possible partner, licensee, acquirer be that the audience might want to follow going forward?
Sure. So I guess probably the best way to answer that question is to look at others who have technologies or have partnership capabilities and what they've done in the past. And they really fall into two categories. One would be a technology provider. A great example of this might be the company Cytiva, which is, of course, the piece of GE Healthcare that was spun off, that provides medical tools to bioprocessing tools to all sorts of folks, CSL, Moderna, pretty much any drug that we see from a biological perspective is passing through something that Cytiva makes and sells to them. They're constantly licensing in technologies for themselves so that then they can pass on to all their customers. They would be a good example of a company who takes technologies that emerge that allow them to either use materials that they already have, bioprocessing materials in new ways, or develop new product offerings for their customers. That would be an example. Not a specific example, but an example. The other side of things would be how we partner with pharma companies. An example there's an exosome-focused company in the UK called Evox. So they signed a couple of deals last year, one with Takeda and one with Eli Lilly, where they found a specific disease area. One was in the CNS, one was in rare diseases, and they would basically agree to work on preclinical assets together over a period of years. So we know companies like Lilly, Takeda, Jazz, pretty much the pharmaceutical industry has their eye on exosomes as a potential delivery agent.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Dirk, the world, as we mentioned earlier, the world became very excited about the recent FDA accelerated approval of Aduhelm or Aduhelm. Someone correct me.
I think the Americans say Aduhelm. So you're not alone in trying to find out how it's correctly pronounced. I've been sort of looking at that as well.
I've only seen it in print. So anyway, Aduhelm.
Well, I was watching some news clip from one of the US news stations just last night, actually, and I'll refer to that later on, where they said it was Aduhelm. So,
okay. We'll say it phonetically, Aduhelm.
It's easier than saying the actual drug name. So,
yeah, it always is. So this is the first Alzheimer's drug approved in almost 20 years. So thank you for doing your research. What's your read on the announcement?
Well, thanks, Matt. I've been following Biogen's Alzheimer's program for a number of years, in part due to an investment in the Adelaide-based biotech company Bionomics, which is also developing a very exciting Alzheimer's drug, working on a completely different theory or pathway. So we'll sort of, over the last couple of years, keeping an eye on what Biogen was doing, because they were working on an old theory, which I'll come to. Obviously, the size of the Alzheimer's market is huge. And given, as you said, no new drug has been approved for this disease for almost 20 years, I think it could be considered really the current holy grail in terms of disease state, population it's currently affecting and will ultimately affect, and then the market opportunity and how many biodollars, I guess, can be made from it. So Alzheimer's disease is characterized by growing deposits of beta amyloid in the brain. Now, research is mixed on whether removing this plaque, or this beta amyloid plaque, can actually help people. That's it's been the theory of getting this plaque out has been the theory or the basis for a number of drugs or drug candidates being developed over a number of years, of which Biogen's decades, yeah. And I think they originally found it, but cutting open dead people with dementia or Alzheimer's sufferers' brains and sort of finding it via cell staining and stuff like that. So anyway, it's there in the brain. People don't know why it's there. It's just there with dementia and Alzheimer's sufferers, and people think by clearing it, then that will allow the brain to process signals more effectively. That's a very simple way of doing it, talking about it. Anyway, Biogen's drug Agilon does clear this beta amyloid from the brain. Now that's been shown. But over the years, we've seen a host of major pharma companies fail with phase 3 programs that are focused on this amyloid plaque theory, including Biogen. And they've wasted billions of dollars of research money in the process. So even before this announcement, even last year when the FDA originally sort of knocked it back, everyone thought this amyloid plaque theory was done and dusted, been put to bed, debunked. And then somehow Biogen do a review of that data, have various discussions with the FDA, and receive an accelerated approval. Then about a month ago, I think it was the start of June, they received an incredibly broad FDA approval based on this spurious data set, where they had one failed phase 3 trial, as they need two positive trials, obviously, to get FDA approval. It's created that much concern, so much that the stats team for the FDA have come out firing, basically saying they can't believe the drug got approved.
Yeah, that's the thing that surprised me. That the statisticians from FDA have actually come out and talked against their own employer, and I presume it's for the fact that you just said. They've done 2 phase 3s, and only one of them reached their primary endpoint. So why such a broad response? But anyway, we're not the FDA, but very interesting development. So now we're going to take questions from the audience. So to the audience, please use the Q&A button on the Zoom screen down the bottom to submit your questions. We have a question coming through. I don't know, I presume this is for you, Dirk. Any thoughts on the upcoming IPO for Lumos Diagnostics?
Look, I'm not fully across that one. So
no, that's okay. Don't want you to feel you need to comment if you're not up to speed with it. But I don't know when it's happening. I'm certainly not over the top of it, Chris. I presume you're not either. Yeah.
Look, and just a quick overview here, courtesy of Dr. Google, talking about finger prick blood tests that can indicate if a person has a general bacterial or viral acute respiratory infection. This is obviously looking at, I guess it's coming into, quick COVID tests. Look, anything that is in that space obviously is going to be, quite hot in this market. I think it says here in the article I'm looking at, they're seeking to raise 63 million. Wilsons and Bells, obviously joint lead managers. Obviously they do their work. If they're doing that significant raise, then it's probably got certainly some meat on the bones. So that's something for me to look at. But as I said before, this space is worth everyone looking at it, and something that's a quick test for COVID is going to be crucial to our roadmap of getting out of COVID.
Yeah. Chris, we've got a question here. What additional clinical areas, indications does Exopharm see itself concentrating on in the medium term?
Great question, Matt. I think that, and this kind of ties back to the discussion we were having a little bit before around Alzheimer's as an interesting disease area. What we see with Alzheimer's is its breadth, the length of impact, the significance to a whole variety of people around the world in a very unmet need. There are a lot of unmet needs inside of the CNS. Parkinson's, MS, glioblastoma. There are a number of basically death sentences or terrible neurodegenerative disorders that happen in the CNS that are very hard to treat with traditional drugs. We think that this is an area where exosomes are going to be really important. The reasons for that are, number one, exosomes themselves have been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier, again, designed by nature for getting across barriers inside of the body. So you will see exosomes being taken up into the brain if you put them into an animal, presumably a patient. And then the second reason is that because you can decorate exosomes with a whole number of external moieties or ligands, I'm using bad words here, molecules on the outside that open doors and let the exosomes pass through the cells that make up the blood-brain barrier itself, and even get into specific cell types inside of the brain. So understanding these delivery vehicles and letting others take drugs that they might have that may well work in mouse models or small primates into the brains of humans, I think is going to be a very active space. It's one that, again, you're going to be very cautious about using other delivery agents around, simply because what gets into the CNS needs to not cause problems for obvious reasons. And that's where I think exosomes have a real place to play.
Well, that's very exciting. We'll watch this space. And Dirk, I presume this one's for you, given your insights on the market thus far. What do you see on the horizon of biotech that we can all get excited about?
Good question, and thanks again for that, Matt. Look, when I look at the ASX life science sector, there has been a significant maturing of Aussie life science companies over the last 3 to 5 years, which shouldn't come as a surprise. But importantly, instead of seeing a large number of, say, phase 1, 2 companies that are going through development, we're seeing a broad field of companies with advanced phase 2 assets, and a number of companies about to enter phase 3 trials. And look, let's face it, phase 2 data is a hell of a lot more interesting than phase 1 data. So look, there's also been a much larger number of ASX listed medical device and diagnostic companies that are now commercializing their products and executing license deals, and importantly, making revenue where they weren't doing that 5 years ago, so. And this maturing of the sector is being met with much larger capital market support than it ever has been. And this is really important. You know, we're seeing small biotechs can easily raise $10 million via replacement these days, and larger companies are putting away 50 to 100 mil capital raises without even breaking a sweat. And as one of the questions was before about Lumo, I mean, that's a great example of that. And this really wasn't happening 5 or 10 years ago. There's only 1 or 2 companies out there that were doing those big raises. So that's really important, and really encouraging to see that happening on the ASX. I think lastly, we're starting to see this trickle down effect of a strong, more mature healthcare sector with startup companies and universities now being able to attract the funding to take interesting early stage projects out into the real world. So yes, look, we're nowhere near the US in terms of the size and breadth of healthcare / biotech / pharma industry, but we're heading in the right direction.
Okay, thanks for that. And we've got another question, which is a generic question relevant to all the attendees. Is this presentation recorded, and how to rewatch it later on? Yes, it's being recorded, and it will end up on the Horizon 3 Biotech website in a week or 2. I'm not exactly sure on the timing, but there's in the news section or latest section, there's a whole bunch of the historic webinars there. Okay, Dirk, another question for you. Not all phase 1 trials are in healthy volunteers, so do ensure you distinguish between phase 1s in healthies and phase 1s with hard efficacy endpoints in patients with disease of interest. Yeah,
that's a really good question, because there are a number of disease states, illnesses that you have to run a number of phase 1s, and there's companies that that have to sort of work out efficacy is pointing in the right direction before going on to larger, more expensive phase 2s. So this is the devil's in the detail here. Just because you see phase 1, don't discount it. There's certain orphan indications that are always going to be sort of phase 1, but they'll come out with efficacy reads, and that's really important. And I've seen a few companies, even with really good phase 1 data, even execute deals or have license agreements done. And I think there's one in the stem cell space here in the ASX. I think Cynata has had some pretty good phase 1 data for their graft versus host disease, which,
Yeah.
you know, depending on the indication, it's enough to get you to the next level, or bring on or invite that partnering interest. So look at the detail, look at the trial designs, you know, and understand the indication, because if it's an orphan indication, you only need a small number of people, and you know, if these patients are at risk of dying in a short period of time because of that condition, or it's pediatric or something like that, then you only need a small number of people, and you only need to, you know, I guess the
Limited burden of proof.
Burden of proof is low, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for helping me out there, Matt. So that's a good question. Bear that in mind when you go to, say, drug repurposing. Well, you're relying on other people's safety data, and so you're really hitting phase 2 straight away. And there's certainly been a few companies that have just recently IPO'd and gone straight to phase 2. So just bear that in mind, and yeah, look at the trial designs and the markets and the indications.
Yep. Now, possibly another one for you, Dirk. What are your thoughts on the potential antimicrobial sector with companies like RCE, which I think is Recce, and BOT, Botanics, listed on the ASX in conjunction with the AMR Action Fund? I presume that's Antimicrobial Resistant Action Fund.
Yeah. So look,
I don't know of that fund.
I don't know of it either, and so we'll see how quickly I can Dr. Google this. But I imagine the name is what it says. You know, they're going after. I mean, there's a big concern in the world, won't come as a surprise to anyone, about resistant bacteria. So antibiotics that are resistant, drugs that are bacteria is resistant to antibiotics, and that's a huge issue. And Recce certainly is going after that. Look, I've been in and out of Recce. I think I might be a shareholder in a small way at the moment. The key thing for them is coming up to, you know, getting their compound into humans. Certainly the preclinical and stuff that they've shown at the moment is very interesting. And then it comes back to the problem they're trying to solve is huge. We certainly need these new types of antibiotics coming onto the market. And I think there's a lot of, maybe this is the AMR fund is talking about, but like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or these big other charitable organizations are throwing money at this problem.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we're going to have to wind it up now. And the next webinar will be on Thursday, the 5th of August at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you to the audience. Your feedback and suggestions are most welcome. Our thanks go to FB Rice and Monsoon Communications for sponsoring and hosting this webinar. And finally, thank you again to Dirk and Chris for joining us. See you all again soon. On behalf of the Horizon 3 Biotech team, goodbye, good investing, and stay safe. Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
Thanks. Cheers.
See you soon. Bye.